Okay, thanks, Liz. Good morning, everyone. How's everyone doing today?
Good.
Good. So today we're going to have a conversation about how asset management works here, and about how everyone can help contribute to an accurate and very reliable database of asset information. I'd like to thank a couple of people first before I start. First of all, I'd like to thank Maya Selzer and Sue Bouillon for helping put the PowerPoint together, so I appreciate that. And I'd like to thank Keith for assisting on this as well. Keith is our assistant director, as you can see from the slide up on the screen, and he is basically the core of asset management, along with James Boswell and Kevin Malone, the core of asset management here for ip&o. So thank you guys. So I want to start off by talking about our asset management goals. So we want an accurate and reliable database. That's first and foremost. If it's not accurate, if it's not reliable, the first time somebody gets bad data in there and they get a report with bad data, they're not going to trust that system anymore. They're going to be looking elsewhere to find that information. So that's key to us, being accurate, being reliable in the system. The other thing is, one of the other goals is we want to be the source for everyone's data decisions. We want you to have data-driven decisions, make those decisions based on that data, that accurate and reliable data. And the other thing we want to do, and we'll talk about this a little bit more, is how do we tell a story here about what we need? We can certainly put a list together and say, I need, $50,000 worth of new equipment in a building. But what's the story behind that? I mean, why do you need this equipment? And the asset management group, or the FCA group, and the asset management data that we have can help you tell that story and hopefully be successful in securing the funding to get what you need to keep everything up and running. So what is asset management? Well, to me, it's two things, two very important things. It's establishing data standards. And by that I mean, how do we get this information into the system? What information do we get into the system? Those are very, very important things. And more important is, what software do we use to manage that database? And the second thing is data integrity. That's one of the reasons why the FCA group is the sole custodian of asset data here at the university. When I say custodian, they're controlling what's going into the system and how it's put into the system. They're not simply, they're not putting every bit of data into the system, but they are controlling that. And data integrity is extremely important. And again, it ties back to accuracy and reliability in the system. So, what is an asset? And I think everyone thinks first and foremost that it's a piece of equipment in a mechanical room, right? It's an air handler. Or it's a piece of equipment in an office like a fan coil unit. That's an asset. Well, it goes beyond that when you start thinking about it. Because everything here, every building is an asset. Every pipe in a building, every wire in a building is an asset. It has an expiration date. It might be, and for a building, it might be 200 years down the road. We've been here for 250 years, right? But we still have buildings from that era. Piping has an expiration date. It's going to wear out eventually. Even electrical wiring is going to wear out eventually. So these things are assets as well. We're also talking about vehicles. They're assets to us. Our landscaping, that's assets. Our parking, that's an asset. Our parking lots are an asset. There's many, many more things that can go into the database as points of information that are assets here at the university. And right now we have approximately 50,000 assets in the system. Each of those assets could have 10 to 20 data points associated with it. So, you know, you do the math on that, and that's quite a bit of data points that need to be maintained in the system. We track not only what the asset is, we track where it's at. We have a cost model associated with that asset, so we know what the replacement cost could be. We have a manufacturer, model, and serial number on these assets, on most of the assets. So all of this information is stored in the system, in the master asset profile. And again, it's 50,000 and growing. Keith is adding more and more each day to the system. So I talked about the Facilities Condition Analysis Unit, and that's headed up by Keith Grabowski. He has two people working with him. That's James Boswell and Kevin Malone. And they go out. Kevin and James are out in the field most days, going through buildings, verifying things, adding barcode tags or asset tags, and Keith will touch on that in a minute or two. So they're out there every day, you know, making sure that, again, that we have things tagged, that any changes that are occurring, that is accounted for in the system. So that's what they do every day. But, you know, it's about data collection, it's about data maintenance, it's about tracking changes. And that's all in support of operations and utilities, right? So operations side of the house, that's the maintenance side of the house. Utilities, that's, you know, the maintenance side of the house as well. We forgot to tell everyone to turn their cell phones down. That's okay. But it also, not only does it support that side of the house, but it also supports our strategic planning. And I think that's where a lot of people have a little bit of a, disconnect, thinking, well, it's only for preventive maintenance. It's only for work orders. Well, no, it applies to strategic planning as well. We make a lot of decisions based on, you know, what do we need? What are our needs down the road? You know, when are assets going to need to be renewed in certain buildings, and that helps us to plan ahead and make those decisions. So at this point, I'd like Keith to talk a little bit about the field work that he does and what the unit does out there.
Good morning, everyone. So Joe wanted me to talk about a little about the FCA project, and it started about 4 years ago. I say project because there's more to it than the asset tags that you guys hear about. The FCA project was actually started about 4 years ago. Joe was working with a consultant, the ISIS group, and they were contracted to evaluate and document and tag all of 500 buildings approximately, Joe? 500 buildings, and go through them and document all the equipment in the building and evaluate all the equipment in there, give us an expected lifespan of this equipment so we can put a number on it for the future and know how long that piece of equipment is going to last, such as air conditioning, heating equipment. Also part of that, they did infrastructure, so they evaluate our utilities, all our underground steam lines. We have reports on all of this. So that was one part of it. So they had one group doing the evaluation of the buildings and the facilities and the, as Joe alluded to, the parking structures, things like that. And the other group was going through and tagging, barcoding all the equipment in the buildings. But again, this is only for the larger buildings. The ones, anything under 5,000 square feet is not tagged or been evaluated. So if anybody has any of those buildings they need us to get to right away, we're working on them slowly, but please let me know. So that being said, if any of the project managers, if anybody has a project, we have information. They did provide numbers, they provided costs, they gave us a brief overview of the condition of our roofs, with accessibility issues, so please let me know. I'll get you the information, I'll show you where to find it, because it may give you a little bit. They do provide numbers, so it may save you doing some cost estimates. So, database management. So we haven't had a chance to do this. What I'd like to do is, Joe and Giseline have asked me a third person, so in the near future, I'd like to have that person just take these reports and start going through the buildings, updating things. And I know there's been changes since the 4 years since ISIS came through. I know we replaced roofs, I know we replaced air handling systems and such, so I'd like to have somebody go through and update these reports so our evaluations are up to date as well. So it's quite costly to bring the ISIS group back in, as much as we'd like to do that. In addition, I'm currently working on a 6-month schedule. I tried this last year and it didn't work out because we got so many other things that I couldn't stick to a schedule. So I'm working with James and Kevin, trying to put together a realistic schedule of when will be in your buildings or when will get in your equipment. So if anybody has any priorities, again, please email them to me. I'll get you on the schedule and make sure I didn't miss anything.
So, can I jump in just a second with the schedule? Also need to mention that once we get the intranet site set up on the new websites, we will be posting that schedule so that you'll have access to that from anywhere. You'll be able to see where the group is on any given day. All right, Keith will be maintaining that schedule. The other thing is that Keith was mentioning about going through those reports and updating those reports. And again, it's a group effort here, okay? Every area manager and planner estimator and even the mechanics that are out there, and I'm not only talking about operations mechanics and supervisors, I'm talking about utilities supervisors and mechanics, can go out there and help us update that database by going through those assessment reports. They are available, again, they were available on our intranet site, and they will be available again on the intranet site. If you do need any in the meantime, we can send you those specific reports for your buildings in your area or even a specific building. And you can go through those pages and you can help us update that. In addition, I'm putting together a functionality that is going to provide everyone with reports on what is needed in their building in terms of asset renewal or assessments for each fiscal year moving forward. Okay? And it'll also be able to tell you what your deferred maintenance liability is. Those are those things that you haven't gotten to, you didn't have the money for, that have been put off. And help everyone make some strategic decisions on, again, how to tell the story, right? How to tell, push that up line and say, this is why I need the money to make these repairs or changes in the building. All right, so sorry.
That's okay. I just wanted to add that one of my main goals is I'm trying to get the PM system down to a realistic count, so we're not getting stuff that does need to be PM, and we're not getting PMs for things that are no longer there. So please let me know the information. I mean, James and Kevin capture what they can out in the field, but it's just the two of them for the, because we're also Norton, Camden, so in the outlying areas, so it's quite a lot of information. So any help, if you're getting PMs, area managers or planners, or you're getting PMs, you know the equipment's not there, what's a piece of equipment that does need a PM, please let me know. I can take that out, take it off so it doesn't come up as a PM. I can still keep it active, but I could use a PM. Because some of the information may not be as good as other parts that, unfortunately, the consultant we had were very good, but they changed teams several times throughout this project. So some of the information may not be consistent as it was. The last group we had was terrific, and I think they got us on the right track. But sometimes the location of the barcode varies. If you don't see the barcode on the unit itself, check the disconnect. If the disconnect is remote, if there was an area, if the air handler was 20 feet in the air and we couldn't get to it, what we do is you take the disconnect. So if you do not see anything on the unit itself, please check the disconnect. Yes,
yeah, that's good.
Okay, so this system here is after you've taken an inventory and you have all your assets, the 50,000 assets set up. Mm-hmm. My question is maintenance and utility departments on a dynamic basis are replacing assets, mechanical equipment, etc. I'm curious to know, what is your method of getting notified about these purchases, or do you proactively go into a marketplace to look at purchases of new equipment and other assets?
So that's coming up in a few slides.
Oh, okay.
So we'll be able to answer that question for you. It's managing the process, and we're typically doing that through the work order system. But we'll explain that in a few minutes, but that's an excellent question. Thank you. I did want to back up just a little bit. Two things, or maybe one thing here, is there's this concept of an asset czar. AssetWorks, who owns the AIM system or develops the AIM system, that's what the purchasers are. came up with this concept of the asset czar. So really the concept is that there is one person or one group that's in charge of, again, kind of like the integrity of the system, right? Making sure that, again, it's accurate, it's reliable. But that person can't do that alone, okay? They need help doing that, and that's what Keith is asking for here, is basically, we're all in this, okay? So if you're out in the field and as an area manager, as a mechanic, as a supervisor, and again, you need to make some decisions, you need to go ahead and ask for some money to get things done, it's important that you participate in the process and get us that information so that we can put it into the system. So again, it can help you tell the story to everyone. So I think we're talking about just
James, obviously.
we're talking about asset tags, right? So what's James doing? Well, James is putting an asset tag on a piece of equipment here, and I must compliment him on, you know, his shirt, because it kind of matches the work of the guy. And actually, we can scan James in the system too. So actually, try that. Anyway, but all the equipment has, and it's a small tag. It's not very big. It's a small tag, but it is on a lot of equipment out there. Again, we have 50,000 pieces of equipment out there that have markings. The numbers on the bottom are the numbers that appear in the system. It is a system-generated number. We don't assign them. We start at a certain number, and the system just generates each number as it comes out, which is the way you want to do it. You don't want to start getting into any crazy, numbering schemes and all. But that's on virtually every piece of equipment. Like Keith said, you have to look for the disconnect in some cases. And that's important too, because, right, everyone should be following lockout tagout procedures when they're PMing pieces of equipment. So it's on the disconnect. You can see it there. You have the right piece of equipment. You can disconnect and go from there.
I just want to interject. A majority of the time, we try and get them right where the manufacturer's label is. So 90% of them are defined by the manufacturer's label, all the manufacturer's voltage ratings and such. So it's only, yes.
When these pieces of equipment are tagged, are you also identifying like the remaining useful life of them? And is there a way that we can?
Most of the stuff we're doing now is new, but these things that have been tagged in the past, yes, there's as per those reports I spoke about earlier, they're identified life. You know, the lifespan is, they gave us approximate date. Depending on how they're PM'd or not, some of the units are PM'd better than others. They extended them beyond where they should be, but we have a general idea of how long we expect the roofs, things like that to last.
Identify priorities, like I have some buildings that, having a lot of problems with existing mechanical systems.
If you let me know the buildings, I can let you know what the priorities are. I can let you know, I can certainly help you with that. I can pull up all the reports, and they identify which, they went through everything. They covered accessibility issues, things as water fountains, bathrooms, things of that nature as well are in there. They identify where we're lacking in that area. But again, they weren't specialized in any one trade, so they just gave us an overview. So it's not, they weren't engineers, they weren't roof consultants, they weren't, they were just engineers who have a basic knowledge of that. So they just gave us an overview. But the information gives, I feel, gives us a good starting point on where our roofs need, where our roof money needs to be spent, and things like that. So please let me know what buildings you're looking for. I'll give you that information.
Right. So yes. So cost models are applied to each asset on the field. So the cost model will tell us basically how much does it cost to replace that particular piece of equipment based on its horsepower rating. In some cases, based on, there's factors for each cost model depending on the piece of equipment. In addition, there is a life cycle attached to that piece of equipment. So the determination is made if they can determine what year it was installed. Okay, we can determine, then we can say, okay, it was installed in the year 2000. We have a 30-year lifespan. In the year 2030, that's going to come up for replacement. I mentioned the functionality that I'm working on. It will give you a property needs analysis for each building. So what we do is we go in and we take those facts from our database, and we give that to you in a format that will tell you in this building, in this particular fiscal year, This is all the equipment that should be replaced based on our assessments and based on the life cycle information that we applied to it. Okay? As Keith was saying, they're going in and doing this, and they're very competent people going and doing this. But again, it's boots on the ground. It's area managers, supervisors, mechanics getting in there and saying, yes, this piece of equipment needs to be replaced this year, or, excuse me, we've done a great job on PMing this piece of equipment. We can move this down the line a few years, or, you know what, we need to get to this right away because really this should have been replaced last year, and it just, we need to get to it. So there's a few things that bits of information in there, but again, it's up to us to maintain that information and to make sure that it reflects the conditions that are out in the field. As Keith said, I have Kevin and James out there in the field doing their best, but we can also use the help from everyone else. Let me use an example here, and what I say to area managers as I go talk to them out in the field. It's basically, they're looking at PMs and they're saying, well, we're doing this one PM and we need some information added to this particular PM. And I said, well, look at it this way, right? You're doing a monthly PM, right? You're doing a quarterly PM. That's the bulk of our PMs that we do, all right? There's some semi-annuals and some annual inspections, but the bulk of what we do is on a monthly basis and on a quarterly basis. So if you give me those changes that you need, if you, and I'll show you the process in a couple of minutes, if you give me those changes, I can then add that information, and the next time that PM is generated, or maybe the time after that, depending on the workload, we can have that information in there, and now your PMs are updated to where you want them to be. Okay, but again, it requires participation because you're touching that piece of equipment on a quarterly basis, on a monthly basis. Your mechanics are out there actually eyes on that equipment, hands on that equipment, doing something to it. Okay, they can get that done. Then what we do is we follow up, excuse me, we will follow up if we need to add a new barcode tag, if we need to go get more information, that's where we can follow up. So again, it requires everyone to kind of buy in and help out. It's only as good as the information going in. So, Keith, did you add any more to the barcode tags? Well, we could show, we have a very 1-minute video here. Let's take a look at this. And pull back the curtain and take it to a mechanical space.
This is the video of the week's engineering building, just all the equipment there. So pretty much everything in this room is going to get a tag, be it, you see the systems, the piping systems, they won't be built on. There'll be something we call a virtual tag. It'll just be placed in there, and it'll show plumbing systems, lighting systems, things of that nature. So there's your chillers, but essentially everything in here, again, is getting tagged, be it under a system asset or a serialized asset.
And there's a lot of things in this room. And as Keith was saying, virtually everything in this room is an asset, right? Including the room itself. And it's going to receive some kind of a tag. Even the buildings that we have, in addition to the building number, the buildings have an asset number. So everything's in the system. It can get very disorienting if you're in there, knowing what to look for, but that's why, again, that's why we have Kevin and James out there. That's why, anybody working on the FCA team has a trade background, okay? And it's important because when you walk into a room like this, you have to know what you're looking at. And again, the mechanics are doing are out there every day looking at these systems and PMing this equipment as well. So that, again, it's important that they help out. Okay, so we had a question about managing the process. And we're doing that right now in 3 ways. Through work orders, to add or adjust asset information, through preventive maintenance work orders, to adjust asset information, and then through projects where we're installing or decommissioning equipment, and this is new equipment that's going in as part of a project or renovation, we use the asset data information form, or as we call it sometimes Exhibit Q, but we'll get to that in a second. So the process for each is from work orders. It's very important when you're doing a work order that you're doing any kind of repair on a piece of equipment, that you include the asset number on that piece of equipment. And this is on, incumbent on the area managers or the planner estimators when they're issuing that work order to a mechanic to go do a repair on a piece of equipment, that they have that asset number on the work order. This ties back, once that asset number is on that work order, it ties back to that asset in the system. It's a relational database, right? So it ties back to that asset to where I can go in and look at that asset and I can tell how many PMs were done on that piece of equipment, how many repair work orders were done on that piece of equipment. Okay, so if I see PMs being done on it, it's got all its PMs done, great, no repair work orders, that piece of equipment's running nicely, it's functioning as it should. If I start to see a lot of repair work orders, as an area manager, as a supervisor, I'm looking at that going, I need to take a closer look at that piece of equipment to see what's going on there, what seems to be the issue. But again, it won't get tied in if you're not putting the number on the work order. So that's important that happens. So any kind of repair or replacement of a piece of equipment. So you could even say, I'm replacing this piece of equipment with a new piece of equipment. We get notified on that. Now, let me back up a second. So Keith has his work desk set up so that he gets notifications on this if something is being changed in the system, if a repair is being made. Okay, so he can track that. We also have a resource account that's coming up in a few slides where you can email us with information and let us know that certain things are happening out in the field. But we have a couple of ways of watching over this. So that's work orders out there. Now, preventive maintenance work orders, when you're out there in the field doing anything, there's also an assessment activity field or feature that you can click on. And you can say either I'm renewing or I'm repairing this piece of equipment, as you can see from the pull-down menu, or I'm replacing this piece of equipment. Now, on preventive maintenance work orders, when they're generated, they automatically have the asset number attached to it. Okay? But by using this feature, that also sends a notification to Keith that something's being done with this piece of equipment. And there's also, and this is just a general overview, but when we get into actually training on this, there are notes that you can add in the notes log to explain what you're doing with the piece of equipment, and so on and so forth. And then the other form, or the other source of information, or other source that we're getting our information from, would be from projects and the asset data information form. And this is simply a fillable PDF that's out there where we're asking, what building are you in? What type of equipment are you installing? We're looking for some basic information on that equipment, manufacturer, model, serial number, some, RPMs, horsepower, different things like that on a piece of equipment. And also who the installing contractor is, the installation date, so that we have an idea of when that was all done. We can include that in the master asset profile for that particular piece of equipment, and we can begin generating PM work orders against it. So, this keeps creeping up here. Apologize. Notification there. These procedures were available on our intranet site. They will be available again once that's up and running. But we're also putting together asset management training on this. So I've asked Sue and Maya to go ahead and develop web-based training that will be self-paced and just in time, which means you're going to go to a particular site. It's going to be available 24/7. So if you feel like doing this at 2 o'clock in the morning, fine. But it'll be available for you to take the course. It's self-paced. There will be assessment questions. There will be a certificate of completion. But it will take everyone that is responsible for creating those work orders and including that information, or doing PM work orders. And basically, the target audience are area managers, supervisors, and planner estimators. It will take them through a course and show them what they need to do in order to help themselves and then to help us and help the database. So that's coming very, very soon. Look for that within the next, by the beginning of the new year. I think we'll have that up and going, right, guys? Beginning of the new year. Not too much pressure, right? But and that's an exciting, actually an exciting part of the training, because it will be our first web-based training that we're rolling out. The training that we've done so far with the Fire app, and a little aside here, has been instructor-led training. So we've been in a classroom setting, we've been live in the classroom and taking people through. But this is our first web-based training that we'll be pushing out there, so that's exciting. Once again, I want to remind everyone of what asset management goals are. They're being accurate, being reliable, being able to depend on that information for reports, for whatever you need it for. In order for you to make data-driven decisions out there, you're not flying by the seat of your pants, you're not taking a guess. We want to stop doing that stuff. We want to make sure we're looking at the data and making sure we're using that to make our decisions. And then once again, as I'm saying, you want to tell that story, right? You want to tell everyone, why do I need that piece of equipment? Not just give them a number on a piece of paper, right? What's the story behind this? Why do I need to replace this? Why is that important? Why is that critical to what I'm doing? And that's a big takeaway that I'd like you to have, is you need to tell that story, and you need to be able to, again, use the data to tell that story. So at this point, are there any questions? And we had a couple before. Yes, I covered everything. Oh, we have a question.
Are you taking steps to add Exhibit Q to our purchasing process? It is in the system for large contracts. It is not a part of our purchase orders. Anything that goes through Mike Dunn's group, it's not there.
Right. Interesting. No, I'm not working on that right now. That is interesting, though, and I will look into that, about whether we can do that or not. I know exactly, it's part of the big contracts. That's why we call it an Exhibit Q. There are a number of other exhibits in there. But we'd like to include that in all projects, but I see what you mean. The smaller projects don't necessarily have that plan. So
there's a lot of data that could be harvested that we're missing because it's not built in.
So even if it's not there, the form is going to be available on our intranet site. So I would encourage everyone to use that, all the project managers that are working on the smaller projects, your team there, to use that and to get the information into Keith. Yes, sir.
We have very broad service contracts for companies such as Otis Elevator, Johnson Controls, and they're broad university-wide. And they're probably going to have one work order associated with that service contract for hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars. Is that taken into consideration in updating asset management for all the equipment at the service contractor, or is that left out?
So with the big contracts, let's take elevators, right, for example. Okay, Keith's got hundreds of elevators in the system now. All right, what we need to do is, and I hope I'm answering your question correctly, is we're taking that information and we're issuing PMs. Now, we're not doing the PMs on that, right? Otis is doing the PMs on that.
Correct.
Right, okay? They're coming in and doing it. But we're issuing those PMs so that we have a record that the PM was issued, Otis came in, and we're attaching the service record to that PM so that, again, we have that record in the system for reporting purposes. The state comes in, they want to see were these elevators inspected. So that's how we're doing that. That's separate and distinct from any work order that was issued to
Right.
secure that contract. So I hope that's answering the question. That's
Yeah, I'm just wondering how you get notified of that service contract that's taking place. Because it won't be just Otis Elevator, it certainly could be Johnson Controls, Carrier for equipment.
Right.
That's why I was asking earlier, are you using Marketplace to identify that, or you're waiting for a work order to pop up on your screen that's attached to that order for, $1 million for the year, or $2 million?
So we have
University-wide, because the individual controls in each campus, in each building, is not identified within that work order. It's for the entire building or campus. And if the work order doesn't identify, it'll just say university-wide, how does the individual building get updated for that service, preventive maintenance service, identified to that equipment in that building for this broad number of pieces of equipment?
Right, and I think it's more again, the effort of, it's more boots on the ground, it's more contact. Yeah, go ahead.
Well, the two gentlemen will handle the elevator, so I'm assuming that they're keeping these records. So Joe and I aren't really part of that. We're just more on the asset end of it. The two gentlemen who are overseeing the elevator contract and the elevator maintenance, I would hope that they're keeping these records and loading them onto the.
So if they don't enter the work orders for each of the buildings, as a PM, it won't get into the asset, it won't be linked to the equipment in those buildings.
No, it would be, as long as they.
They have to do that, though.
So okay, so the work order
Because
for
Otis
that.
is coming in, or Johnson Controls is coming in, or Carrier is coming in, as opposed to our staff. So you're suggesting that they're putting out a work order each time they come in to show that that service was done?
So the PM would be issued the service, whoever's providing that service, that would be attached to that as a related document. So whether whether Otis is doing it
Or
or
Johnson
another,
Controls.
right, Johnson Control. Well, let's right. So air handlers, right, or a chiller, right. Whether Carrier's doing that or whether another company is doing that, that gets attached to the work. So the PM is there. The PM needs to be done on that particular piece of equipment, whether it's done in-house by Carrier or by someone else. Okay, we can attach that as a related document, or you'll see the labor hours from our particular mechanics on it. But that's separate and distinct from any kind of service contract work order. That's right. So that's separate and distinct. Yeah.
But in a perfect world, Gary, anything that's done, that asset's, that the PM's entered against that asset, when you bring up that asset, there should be a whole history of that through that asset number. As long as you can track everything that's done to that, as long as it's been, the information is there, it can be attached to that number.
Maybe what I'll do is I'll pick a particular asset and
Sure.
I'll do an inquiry with you later on.
Okay.
And we'll see how that
Okay.
goes through.
Good.
When you talk about assets, for example, in the photograph of the evacuator, you're looking at a boiler.
Yeah.
You cascade down the assets to a particular level, because that theoretically, the boiler has the boiler itself, feed water system, and the burner. How far down do you go with that?
You can get as detailed as you want to get. You can get as granular as you want to get with it. Right now, we're at a basic stage of where we have all the assets in the system. Are we drilling down?
Yes, we do have some of the, I don't know if we got to a lot of things, but a lot of you'll see the chillers, things of that, the chill water pumps are linked to that asset. It'll take you back to the.
But if you had a chilled water pump, you're talking about the pump and the motor,
Mhm.
two separate entities. Is that one asset or is it two?
Oh, no, they're all tagged, let me back up, they're all tagged individually, but they can be linked. Like, if you were to go on there, you can see what pumps are associated with what chiller and cooling tower, so to speak. But they're all tagged individually.
So we're looking at a boiler as a system, as one entity. Okay, and then you could add components to that. You could take that burner assembly and you could say, all right, I want to list that as a component, and we could tag that as well as a component to that boiler. But we're looking at the boiler as one system at this point.
Okay.
Okay. All right. Yes.
Can we access the data, or how do we access the data? For example, if I'm looking for information about a lightning protection system, can I go to a website and drill down on a building and see who installed the services or who certified the lightning protection system?
You should have read-only. You should have the ability to read in the system, right? So you get into the asset management module, and you should be able to go in there. Everybody should have the ability to read the information in the system. If you don't, then we'll get you set up with that. Okay? Are there any other questions? Okay, last one. So if you have any further questions for general support, you can sorry, James.
So, and kind of an answer to the question he had about the particular PM. So there's a profile that goes with each different PM. So if I'm out and I'm tagging a pump, I'll tell Keith what type of pump is associated, then he'll associate a PM template for that particular asset. Whether it's a boiler, if it's a backflow preventer, we take all that stuff into consideration. Like if it's a small B&G pump and there's no maintenance done to it, it's a throwaway pump, we won't even tag that. I don't know if that helped answer the question.
I guess.
Again, it can we can get as detailed as possible. I'm sorry about that. We can get as detailed as possible. Right now, we're looking at this at a very high level. So we're looking at boiler as a boiler, not as breaking it down into different components. But eventually, it can get to that point where we do that. Okay. So for general support, you can contact us at iwms.help@ipo.rutgers.edu. Of course, Keith can be reached. Excuse me, here. And then I can be reached as well. And thank you very much for participating today in the program, and hope that it's been informative. Thank you. Have a good day.